First time I physically saw him was in New York Temple, Henry Street. It's 1972. It's right after the Ratha Yatra. And I had met devotees in Texas, and they had encouraged me to go and meet Prabhupada there. And so I went with my teacher, my sculpture teacher, Murti, who later became Murti Das. And we just got to the Henry Street Temple, and a devotee before us had told Prabhupada's servant that 2 artists were coming to meet Prabhupada. One was a professor at a university. We weren't there 20 minutes before we were escorted up into Prabhupada's rooms. And we got up to his, there was a sort of an ante-room, just a kind of an area before you went into his rooms proper. And we were left there, and you could smell the fresh paint everywhere. White walls, no, blue walls, powder blue walls with white trim. And Prabhupada wasn't in his room. He was actually down the stairs using the restroom. And so when I first saw Prabhupada, we heard this patter, patter of feet coming up the stairs, and we were just standing there, you know, like deers in the headlight. And Prabhupada came up, and he was just dressed in his gamcha, and he had his Brahman thread wrapped around his ear. And we both hit the floor. At that point, we didn't even know the prayers, you know, it was like just blah, you know. And so my first impression of Prabhupada was how regal he was, even in this very domestic, you know, situation. Just how regal he was. And he immediately, first words out of his mouth is, "I'm not a king. This is not for me. This is an educational facility for teaching Krishna consciousness." And he could tell that my teacher and I were, you know, pretty wound up. And so he immediately started with small talk. We went into his room. He sat down behind his desk. And he just started asking us about Vishnu Jana Swami, about Texas. Is it hot there? Do you like wearing dhotis in Texas? I mean, you know, just stuff, you know. And so that sort of broke the ice. And then Aravinda, who was his secretary, he asked him to bring in a painting of Panchatattva. And it was actually a drawing, I think. And he knew we were sculptors, and so he said, can you do this? Can you produce these? We'd like to put them in our temples all over the world. And you know, where we were coming from, we were these sculptors in Texas at this very liberal university, Austin, Texas. And I had worked a little bit with figurative work and taken a lot of life drawing, but I'd never really done clay figurative pieces. I'd done only steel abstract things. And Murti Das was coming from the same space. And I said, "Yes, Prabhupada, we can do it." And Murti Das was a little wiser than I was. He said, "We'll try." And so Prabhupada asked us, and he even gave us a size. He said, about 40 inches, you know. And so years later, we produced a set of Panchatattva for Hawaii. And before we sent them, I measured them, and they were about 40 inches. I mean, it was, you know, it's like we hadn't planned it. It had just kind of happened that way. But anyway, that was my first impression of Prabhupada. I took initiation, Brahminical initiation from Srila Prabhupada at that time. I went out and collected Dakchin and sent a letter to him with the Dakchin saying, "What do you want me to do? What can I do?" And so then Prabhupada sent me a letter back in '73. And this was like the letter that changed my life, and I'll just read it real quickly. This was March 24th, 1973. "Please accept my blessings. I beg to acknowledge receipt of your letter and enclosed Dakchin. Regarding murti making, yes, I want that those who can do it nicely, they should go to Mayapur and take instruction there. on how to make murtis, and especially dolls. We want to make dolls of Krishna Lila. So I didn't have any conception of what this was. Just like in London, I was seeing thousands of people going to the wax museum to see dolls of dead men, and even they were paying to see them. So we want to make dolls of all the wonderful activities of Lord Sri Krishna, and just by seeing people, we'll get spiritual benefit from it. So you consult with Karundar and do the needful. That was Prabhupada's letter to me. I was in Mayapur. One of my duties when I first got there was to make up sandalwood paste. And I could put sandalwood paste on Prabhupada's forehead before he gave class in the morning. And so I was so proud of myself. I'm doing this service. And the first couple of mornings, everything was okay. I thought, wow, okay, I got this down. I know how to make it just the right, thickness to where it stays on his forehead nicely. And then, second or third morning, Prabhupada uttered something, and I couldn't understand what he said. I said, "What's Srila Prabhupada?" And he uttered it again, and I still couldn't understand what he said. And finally, the third time, I guess it was Shruti Kirti or whoever his servant was, said, "Use your right hand," because I'm left-handed, and I was putting the flowers on them. So that was an instructional, tidbit from Srila Prabhupada.
Je anilo premadana koruna prachu